Hello, welcome to the meeting tent, an ongoing series on the work of Stan Tenen. Before we get started, I'd like to introduce our usual cast of characters: Adele Packer, Daniel Gill, Michael Andron, and Levana Tenen. So today we're going to go a little bit outside our comfort zone. This whole series dealt with our level of expertise within the Jewish realm, but Stan stepped beyond that, and he was always looking for metaphors outside of the Jewish perspective to show that his ideas were universal and that it came along in other works of art over the centuries. And today we're going to explore one, maybe two of those. And in the book, Alphabet That Changed the World, you'll see, if you have the book in the appendix, you'll see the poster that we're going to show. And this has to do with Rumi, the poet Rumi. Jalal-ad-Din Muhammad Rumi was a 13th century Persian poet. Apparently his work is the best-selling poetry in the US. So many of you watching this may be already familiar with Rumi. And the literature that he wrote is beautiful, and you should definitely check it out. And one of his works led to what is called the round dance. If you've ever heard of a whirling dervish, it has to do with the Medlevi round dance that was inspired by Rumi. And so Stan found this and found the correlations. I say, let's just jump into it, and then we can, and then Levana, maybe you can give us some background on it. So this is the poster we're working with. This is Stan's poster and there were several variations on this continuous creation. And he's basically showing us all the different metaphors. Again, if you look at this poster, and it is also in the book, in the appendix, I mean, you'll see, and we'll spend more time exploring this specific poster. We did a little bit, but we can definitely go into this a little bit more. But if you notice on the top right, Aladdin's lamp, and the Star of Seeds, the crescent and the moon. So you can see there are other perspectives here that Stan's showing. So he took this poster and he applied it to the geometry of Rumi's Medlevi Sufi round dance. Now, this is based on a poem that is also in the book. And while we look at this and we look at the different elements in this poster, I'm going to ask Levana to read the poem that is actually in the book and see if you can see the correlations between what she's reading and what's on this poster.
Okay, this is Rumi's poster. This is a poem by Rumi. He was a 13th century Medlevi Sufi poet. And this poetry is describing what he calls the round dance. Come, come, let us whirl about in the rose garden. Let us whirl like a compass around that point of divine grace. We have sowed many seeds in the ground and turned about the barren place. Let us now whirl about the grain which no granary comprehends. I am turning beside the Sultan. I am like a goblet in the circle of dancers, turning from one hand to the other with my story. Come, come, O thou who art the soul of the soul of the soul of the round dance. Come, thou who art the walking cypress and the garden of the round dance. Come, thou under whose feet is the fountain of light, who has 1,000 Venuses in the heaven of the round dance. You leave the two worlds when you enter the round dance. The roof of the seventh sky is certainly high, yet even this roof does not reach where reaches the ladder of the round dance.
So you can see some of those stanzas are on the poster itself. The soul, the soul, the soul, the round dance. And Stan goes into it a little bit more. Do you remember when he did this or came up with this?
Well, the Rumi poem, he spotted that very early, back in a time period when it was before we wound up focusing much more in a focused way on Jewish tradition. This was back in the period when he was basically looking everywhere, looking to find commonalities, which he believed would be there. Um, yeah, and also we had a couple of friends who were uh, following a particular Sufi teacher in Berkeley, and so etc. So that this was part of his knowledge base. What he saw in this poem was correspondences to what we call the continuous creation drawing. That's the blue toroid in the middle with the bronze colored first hand model in this poster about the round dance. Yeah, there you go. He saw geometric correspondences. He saw correspondences in the function of each particular point. You know, the fact that the roof of the seventh sky is certainly high, yet even this roof does not reach where reaches the ladder of the round dance. What the poem appears to be talking about is the the place from which what we've been calling the shefatal, the flow of energy that keeps the universe going, and that is beyond dimension. It's beyond counting. It's beyond all concepts that we can conceive of. Even it's certainly high, yet even this roof does not reach where reaches the ladder of the round dance. I'm just picking that one because it was only one page flipped back instead of two. Another one is where he is talking about, where are we? The grain which no granary comprehends. There's just a whole lot of physical imagery which he found. The grain,
The grain
yeah,
in the center is the star of
are
seeds.
of seeds, right? And he relates that to the geometry of the hand model when you see it pictured in that toroidal surface that's in the middle of this poster. There's a lot here that I can see in small print, which is more of studies, more worthy of study than anything else. As he says, the soul of the round dance, three repetitions of soul is a reference to the three hands. In other words, if you take a look at the central poster and you look at the green plane in the middle of the blue figure, you can see Stanley has divided it into three, which this is a perspective drawing. Each one of those segments is actually equal. It's the same size and the same shape. It's just a perspective drawing that makes it not appear that way.
Where are you looking now? Where are you?
I'm looking at the blue toroidal figure at the top center.
Oh, okay.
There is a green horizontal plane through the middle of it.
Yes,
And if
okay.
you look closely, you can see it's divided into three,
Right, right.
and that those three sections are they're actually equivalent. They're exactly the same.
Yeah.
Basically, just dividing that circle into three. The reason why they look different is just this is a perspective drawing, and that's what you do if you're drawing in a perspective drawing. And what he is saying that this is a reference to is the fact that there are three, if you divide that in three and put three first-hand models in there, that's the goblet and the circle of dancers turning from one hand to the other with my story. Three hands put 12 fingers or dancers on the circumference. When he spotted congruences like this, he went into very deep detail as to what the congruences were. And if you have the book, continuing on pages 335 and 6, which is like a couple pages after this poster, is a list that's coordinated with, with the letters here, the A, B, C, H, all of those, is a list of all the correspondences which he feels that these images suggest. And one thing to remember is that when Stanley came up with these long lists of many different correspondences, some of them he was certain of, some of them were suggestions, but what it's meant to make you think of is that these physical relationships, these geometric relationships, seemed to, and our research definitely found it, seemed to pop up in many different traditions. You need to be able to read, some translations reflected that and some don't, but he consistently found this, things corresponding to this continuous creation image in many different cultures. And what that said to him is that there's something intrinsic to either our consciousness, our world, the way in which people explore things. There's something intrinsic about that image and the geometric and process relationships that it depicts.
So here's Stan trying to use a scientific method to disprove his theories, and he just keeps finding new examples from varied sources that nobody else has ever made a connection with, and at least not in our lifetime. Let's get back to the round dance, because when we hear the word dance, we want to turn to our choreographer, Adele, and you kind of rocked onto this idea of the round dance, didn't you?
Yes, I remember Stan pointing it out to me, that section of the book. And of course, I got to it as I read through the book. The round dance, any image of a dance, is very inspiring. And there are so many round dances in all different ethnic traditions. It's a community. As soon as you have a circle dance, you have this connection, and it rings true. It doesn't have to be a Jewish tradition. In Israeli dance, you see it in Greek dance, and you see it in African dance. So this community around a circle became part of the choreography in Etude 22. It was a way to kind of whirl the letters and have a playful exploration of the gestures in movement. So we whirled it. And it was interesting because the musician was playing, Ilan Dahara was playing on his own when I came in to work one day. And I said, "What are you playing? This is so interesting." It was on 5. And we had made this circle dance on 4. And I said, "I'm going to change the whole circle dance on 5." So all the dancers had to relearn the entire dance.
What does that mean on 4 or 5?
It was literally a 5/4 piece. And it had a little bit of a Greek feel to it. And yeah, so I just I hope that sound of the phone call coming in didn't disturb,
Whatever.
but anyway, it was 5/4. So we changed it from 4/4 to 5/4, which gave it a lilt and a little complexity that it was exactly what it needed. So it was a lot of fun to choreograph that and to have that theme at one point in the dance, and then to repeat the circle dance. It wasn't always, when it repeated, it wasn't always on a 5/4. Although it might have been, I just can't recall. It was in 2019 now. It's already some distance on that work. Yeah, but I definitely used the gestures of every letter from Aleph to Tav throughout the circle dance. As it repeated and as it went through, every letter came in. So it was a lot of fun to weave it.
A part of the round dance in terms of the Medlevi round dance has to do to getting a state of ecstasy, the spinning. And it's still performed today, I believe, in parts of Turkey and maybe other places too, maybe here in the US. But there are certain rules, and only certain people are allowed to do in the Muslim culture to do the round dance. But there are definitely.
Is it a round dance for an individual? In other words, like a world?
It's spinning. It's
dervish?
spinning. There's a group.
Okay.
There's a group, and you can see the videos on YouTube, and they wear
Yes.
these beautiful outfits that are round at the bottom.
Yes.
Also, yeah, if you go to, like I said, it's just, and you can see that the dancers are in a state, of ecstasy,
Yeah.
and they have to be qualified to do it, and there are, certain rules that go, but and I mean, it's been done obviously for centuries. So here we have Rumi, who lived in the 13th century. And as our Kabbalists know, this is kind of a banner period from, you say, the 10th to the 13th century and what was going on in Spain at the time, but obviously through the Muslim world at all. Do you guys see any correlations here, either what you're seeing on the poster or, what was going on in the Muslim world? Daniel?
Well, I mean, I think it's hard to tell. I think one of the things I know Stan talked about was the seed, the tree, the seed, and the fruit, and how Judaism is likened to the seed. It's got all the information, and then the fruit drops to the ground and disintegrates, which is the process of Islam, to let go, and the tree represents action in the world, which is Christianity. And so we all have every one of the monotheistic religions has a purpose, a divine purpose, and the Muslims have this tradition of this dance, which is similar to a fruit, and they also have a law that they're not allowed to drink alcohol. They're not allowed to consume alcohol. And I think it's actually really important for their mission that they don't, because I mean, I'm not, people are free to do whatever they want, but like theoretically, it's meaning this, because one can get a feeling of letting go when they drink or imbibe something or whatever, and that can be fine. But for the Muslims, it seems like this process of letting go is the most important part of the religion. And what's neat about the Sufis is that they do it through this exuberant dance, and they're able to focus. Part of the thing that they're doing is they're focusing their consciousness, and indeed, people find that meditation, if you can have the patience to sit with it literally, or in this case dance with it, can do wonders beyond what drugs can do. Drugs, they're like the kiddie pool, and alcohol, like all those ways of letting go are like the kiddie pool compared to focus, concentration. Anyone who's danced with a group or played music in a group or composed for a group knows that the feeling of release and of letting go, of submitting to the moment cannot be greater than a shared meditation based on movement or music or something like that. So I know that it is true that the golden age of Kabbalists in Spain was really also right around this time. So the Shari Ora and the Ramban before, and then the Ramban's teacher, Rabbi Azriel of Garona, were all in this time period, and Moshe de Leon. So it's a very, very, I mean, boy, wouldn't it be neat to just even for a moment go back in a time machine and hang out with all those people, because they weren't fighting, as their relations were still pretty good, you know. So it was a neat time in the world, in world history.
Yeah, they tell one of the golden ages where Jews, Muslims, and Christians were able to communicate, and so much great work came out of this period in Spain, in Islamic Spain, which ended about the 14th century. And before, when Daniel was referring to letting go, he's talking about, he's referring to Stan's Tree of Abraham model that demonstrates the three religions in that image of a tree, a seed, as Judaism. It's on our website, the tree being the manifestation, and then Islam being letting go of. So I won't get into that for now. Michael, do you see any correlations here in any of the studies that you've done over the years?
I have more questions than answers. I see he's got the shofar in here, and I assume he's talking about a circular shaped shofar, which follows that same single point to an openness, similar to the hand model. I'm wondering if there is in those traditions a clockwise or a counterclockwise preference in the dance. Maybe Adele knows that, I don't. You mentioned just in your overview that this is to achieve a state of ecstasy, being in the dance. That's understandable. I mean, there's a certain, I don't mean like out of control, but there's a certain dizziness that comes with that whirling around in circular fashions. Ecstasy toward going back into creation, what is the end goal of that? Or is it just to connect to God as that particular tradition sees it?
Yeah, I think that's what it is. Yeah.
Okay.
I mean,
do you have any? You don't have any video of these, or
the spinning?
Of either the one that Adele did. I mean, I've seen Sufi dancing.
I'll be interspersing the one that Adele did. I'll be putting that while she's talking.
Okay.
See how she did that. But you know, her purpose wasn't to reach ecstatic. It was for art. You know, more of an artistic expression. But yeah, Adele.
Yeah, but I could say that there was a sense of spirituality, especially as the circle pulled into the center with all of the dancers' arms. And the very bottom of this poster on 334, the geometry of Rumi's.
Yeah, let me put it back up.
Sufi round dance, on the bottom right, the compass. And he uses the hand model, you know, as a circle of a compass, and as though the 4 fingers were the dancers. And let us whirl like a compass around the point of divine grace. And that's really the essence of a circle dance. While it's connecting with community, there's something about the center of the circle, whether it's spoken or unspoken, that connects the whole circle together. And I think that was more what the dance was about than a whirling dervish in one spot. It definitely wasn't exploring that, although those whirling dances are amazing. And I know that the dancers are reaching a higher and higher state. It's an elevating state that they're coming to as they whirl more and more and more. But this was just more playful and community oriented. And yet there was a moment in the dance where, oh, we all have a message to send up. And there was no question that it was coming to a higher spiritual place that was obviously right there in the center up of the circle. So I think that's the inspiration I got from this. I wasn't researching. But the Rumi's dance actually was. I was really just creating something new. Yeah.
That actually intrigues me because I haven't heard you describe that part of your dance in exactly those words. It intrigues me that, here we have a creative effort, a creative performance from a totally different direction. And it wasn't necessarily your intention, but this community and point of energy in the center happened. And that goes again to there is some universality to these processes that is awakened in the human consciousness, because we see it everywhere, that process is happening, whether people are intending it or not. Thank you for saying what you did, because it's there's something intrinsic about this, and that I think was something that Stanley always perceived, that there's something in accordance with our nature as conscious physical beings, that these processes in these shapes, a process happens in a shape. It's just part of how we're built, and that he was finding this in various different ways embedded into traditional Jewish material, was something that he and I feel is very important and not known or seen by very many people.
And I'm recalling now that metaphor that was in the little film that we showed last week, this animation of the letters coming down and then the letters going back up, that was an important seed idea that came in at the end, where the narrator spoke of the prayers from our heart that sometimes falter or come out a little awkwardly, that when those letters go up, God organizes them and hears our intention. And so there was something in the narration that supported the end of that circle dance when the arms were going up. And there was also a little bit of a whirling activity in every dancer in the spots on the floor that were the sephirot at the very end of the dance, when the letters were being said and turned. We kept turning as we were gesturing the letters. And by the end, all the dancers were spinning in their place, and then it's kind of ended with a flourish. That was the end of the whole piece. So, you look back sometimes on maybe a visual artist will draw something, or a poet makes a poem, and they look back later and they see something that opens up for them that they didn't maybe know consciously at the time they made it. But I knew I was onto something very large, but at that time I didn't know how big many of these concepts were. It's only the study I've done in the past 5 years since the dance was made that has really enlightened what I created. It's kind of a remarkable process.
Stanley used to say, he would reread every a few months, he would go through and reread our book, and he would say, "Oh, I learned something on every page." That that
Yeah.
as we grow and learn in life, I think we acquire different and enriched connections to our thoughts and ideas that maybe were not conscious when brought out in stuff we did 20 years previous, but nonetheless, their seeds were there. And, with age and experience, you can say, oh, gee, that was what I was thinking of. And this fits in with X, Y, Z, A, B, C that I have learned since. So I think that's probably a process that any creative artist, whether you're writing a book or an exposition or making a dance or painting or music or whatever, that's just part of the creative process if we're lucky enough to live 20 years after we've created it.
Hmm. I wanted to
The
point out,
yeah,
oh,
go ahead.
well, I just wanted to point out just one more thing on this poster. This is really an important aspect, this whole idea of the seed. And he's correlating the grain in the poem with the star of seed. Um, and and he's also pointing out the fingertips from the crescent of the moon, with the star seeds in the center, the star and crescent of his star. I mean, this is the basic. This is the crux of the faith in terms of the symbolism. Let us whirl about the grain which no granary comprehends. I mean, it's a and here we're seeing it visually. So I mean, I think people really need to look at this and see that it's based on a consciousness of reality that exists and that we are not in tune with in our world today, but they were back then. Go ahead, Michael. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no. Because he's focusing here on the three major monotheistic religions. I wonder whether he ever explored anything in the Chinese realm. There is a system in the martial arts that works as a brother system with Tai Chi Chuan, which people are familiar with, that very slow-moving, meditative kind of system that deals with energy, called Bagua, spelt Pa Qua, but any well-defined person speaking the higher Chinese would say Bagua, which is done not in an XY axis as most of the martial arts are, but done on a circle. The primary exercise of Bagua is walking the circle, and you would achieve a pose, and you would place a B that's P apostrophe I, pronounced B with the B sound, and it's made out of different stones. You'll see decorative jewelry with simply a circle with a hole in the middle of it. And in martial arts, as you achieve greater achievement, you would receive one as almost like a belt, as we think of it in the martial arts, as a symbol of rank, that you are able to walk the circle at a higher place. And the focus is always on the middle. You're always aware of the middle. And the Bakwa is something that you see. I wish I had realized this beforehand. I went looking, I thought I had it in here. But you've seen the three broken lines, either a straight line or a broken line. And there are 8 of those, which is what Bagua means, the 8 trigrams layered 1, 2, 3. And then those are put together to create 64 hexagrams, which is what you have in the book of the I Ching, and is used as an oracle of sorts. You ask a question and you create these, and then 1 hexagram, that's your answer, so to speak. And of course, the answer is within you, but each one has a particular aspect of life or understanding or some inner understanding. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Well,
with
my
the
question
broken
to you
lines?
is, Michael, is that after having, spent all these months going through this work that Stan's doing and finding basically the geometry behind this work and being able to show the multidimensionality and expression in other worlds, in other words, you asked at the beginning, well, has somebody done that? I mean, it would seem like you would be the logical person to explore that and to see if there's a correlation. Not being, steeped in geometry, obviously, that would be kind of difficult, but instinctively, is there that correlation that Stan made in terms of finding these ideas with Rumi's dance and being able to express it in these ways? Obviously, in the Eastern cultures, they're expressed differently in different ways. And I'm not saying look for the math, but look for that expression that goes beyond the two-dimensional.
Well, you have to realize most of these systems are practiced for years and years and years doing a singular form. There's one set dance. It's not done usually improvisationally. Whereas if I'm going to get up and demonstrate a sword form or something in front of 3,000 people, generally I wouldn't just free form with the swords and create an imaginary battle in my mind that I'm fighting those things, which might be a negative inclination within myself. What Adele said earlier, that all of the letters seem to, you used all the gestural letters, and if you were just free forming it and suddenly you spelled out something, just kind of winging it, okay, just improvisationally, I think that might be very similar to what is done here, because you are receiving and giving at the same time. That's the application in martial arts, that someone is throwing a strike at you in some way and you take it, and instead of just whacking it away, you absorb it into your circle and defeat them with their own force by, receiving it, whirling it around and throwing it. Aikido makes use of that in the Japanese culture. I think the very idea that you could, and every one of the Taiji postures is known to have an attached hexagram to it, is 2 sets of 3, one on top of the other, so that in the same way that you might spell out something by free forming within that world, get to that state of ecstasy where something is received from a higher place. Similarly, you would do that with the gestures of the alphabet, with all the hand motions reaching and pulling in and coming out. And when we went through all the letters, it was very clear that there's that aspect also. Some are internal going out, some are outside coming in. And that's a very smart application of it for purposes of self-preservation, of defending yourself. In other words, you might not be able to defeat this big guy unless you could take the strike and sort of absorb it and throw him out the other way, bring him into a circle and whip him out. Not unlike, and I don't know if he mentions it here, I see a whole bunch of application stories, but the famous sling of David and Goliath.
He does mention that in another place. Yes.
Yeah, it's on one of our
So,
videos. In fact, I have a
okay.
information of that.
Yeah, so that particular motion is what the Bagua system is all about.
Interesting, because the places in which he used that analogy were when he was describing the reciprocal spiral.
Yeah.
We talked about last time.
And so that actually coordinates with what you just said in terms of turning the energy. It's a reciprocation of energy which is being used. That was actually the word that
Well,
came
listen,
to mind when you were describing
yeah.
it.
Energy can't be destroyed. It can only be recycled and recreated and so on. And the Bagua system is about that. Very few people use it as an application. It's an advanced kind of form. But the idea of paralleling the hexagrams and their inner meanings, which is a whole life study, to the gestural alphabet would be an interesting study. I don't know the hexagrams nearly well enough. I remember spending some time many years ago with Kai D. He was in the original movie, The Manchurian Candidate. He was the bad guy. He wasn't actually Chinese. He wasn't Chinese. He also had a series, short-lived, called Khan, where he was a detective. He looks Chinese, but he wasn't Chinese. He used to joke he was a Polynesian blend because he had a variety of cultures in him, but he had Asian eyes and big, heavy guy, kind of, and low fat on Hawaii Five-O was.
Oh yeah, I remember that guy. I remember that.
Yeah, he was the guy. Well, he was also a doctor of psychology,
Yeah.
and he was also a Taoist master and wrote books on the I Ching. And I spent time with him. He came to the University of Georgia when I was working there, and it was mostly an undergraduate school, but I was in a doctoral program there. And so I was given the pleasure of taking him around to the various places he could speak, because he would go to the theater department, and he went to the Kung Fu club that I had set up on campus when I was there, and to the psychology department, and he would talk about all these different things. And they said, can you really use, this is just an amusing story, but he said, can you use the I Ching to really answer life's problems? He said, all right, let's try an experiment. And he asked everyone in the room, this is in the psych department, to write down a major question they had about life. And then after they had taken a little time to do that, he said, all right, now work it down into only 8 words. The Chinese were very big on the number 8, still are. And the Bagua. And he had a medallion on him that had the broken lines and the yin yang in the middle, which is usually the way you see it. Sometimes there are little mirrors that are made. It's got a mirror in the center of an octagon. And each of the 8 corners has one of the 3, broken top, broken middle, broken bottom, all 3 in the various combinations. And after everybody got it to one word, he walked around and he was wearing this brocade jacket with the medallion and the look on his face. You expected him to be a wise man. I mean, it was like if he said, this is the answer to your life question, you'd take it seriously, because he just had the look. And he went over to the first person and he picked it up and he read their question. And then he slammed his fist on the table. And he went to the next one and he picked up a pencil and snapped it and threw it up in the air. And he went to the next one and smacked the guy across the face, which he joked as being the sound of one-handed clapping when he smacked him across the cheek. And he went around and he did some different action with each of the people in the class. There were like 20 plus people. And he said, now I have answered all your questions. I'm going to leave for a few minutes and I want you to think about how I've answered your questions. And he walked out of the room. And everybody's like, was he serious? And so they all began to look down and wrote down notes that he was encouraging them to understand what the answer to their life question was. And when he came back, he asked how many of them had found the metaphor of what he did to be helpful in finding an answer to their life question. And every hand went up. And he said, all right, now let me tell you a secret. You found the answer or some part of the pathway on the journey of discovering the answer to your life question. As an actor, I know how to throw my eyes out of focus. I never read your question. Not only did I read it, I didn't think about what I was doing. I just picked the first thing that came into my mind, like smashing your desk, slapping you across the face, or pulling a pigtail, or whatever it was. And he said, and yet you found an answer with my random metaphor. And I didn't even know what your question was. So it wasn't like he was thinking of some symbolic answer from his wisdom as both psychologist and Taoist master. And he said, and the reason the I Ching is not an oracle per se is that the answer is in you. You know the answer to the question. You just don't know where to look. And he just gave them a focal point, which sort of fits in with this whole chart. You know, the singular point, if they could just focus on anything, because everything in nature is linked, both from these various philosophies as well as quantum physics. Everything is connected, that they could find these answers within themselves. And it was a very powerful lesson. And he was a lovely human being. And there was a professor at Georgia that I didn't get along with. And it always seemed like we were in an argument. And so when I drove him back to the hotel and was going to take him to the airport, I said, listen, I have this problem. Maybe you got an answer for me? And he said, yeah, go in. And then when you see her, because I was doing a student thing where they paid me. So it was kind of like a work study thing. And my office was right next to hers. I had all the tech stuff, all the projectors and equipment.
Michael, we're running out of time here.
Okay, all I'm telling you is, he said, just go in and thank her for all that she's done. When she criticized you, you knew that it was out of love. That's all you got to tell her. And from that time on, it wasn't that everything that I said in the class was wrong. Everything that I said, I could open my mouth and say the most ridiculous thing, and she would praise me. And it was like, the answer is not always where we think it should be. And all of these diagrams, if you kind of pull them all together, come to the same, to finding that seed, that spark of divinity within each of us. So that was a long way around of getting my story.
Okay, well, I wanted to get in one more example of Stan finding correlations with the geometry. This one is a little bit of a stretch, but I think it's interesting. This took place, it's actually available for viewing on the videotape called Alphabet in Our Hands, Part 2. And now we're going to go to a European source in the philosopher, I guess, poet, Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who lived in the 19th century. And he wrote a poem called Kubla Kahn. It was based on the capital being Xanadu. And Xanadu, we've heard that expression many times. If you ever saw Citizen Kane, the famous movie by Orson Welles, and many songs have come in. In any case, I'm going to go ahead and play it. It includes an introduction, and we're going to hear, and Stan's going to give us the poem, Kubla Kahn, with highlighting the geometric metaphor that he came up with. So let's go ahead and play that. This is going to be about 3 minutes. So sit back and relax and enjoy.
Let me read it. This is Samuel Taylor Coleridge's Kubla Kahn. And I'm not a very good reader, so bear with me. One of the first things that comes up is, what does the name Kubla Kahn mean? I don't know for sure, but there's an interesting quality in Hebrew and in some other ancient languages, and that is that the vowels are left out, and that you can read the meaning from the consonants alone. So if we drop out the vowels of Kubla Kahn, we get KBL and KHN. And this may be a silly coincidence. I really don't know. I haven't done the research. Most of the coincidences I'm going to tell you are not silly. This one may be silly. You could read that as Kabbalah Kohen. You could say that this is a description of something Kabbalistic from a priestly perspective. And as it turns out, when you get to the end of the poem, there's a kind of confirmation of that. So let me just read it and see what kind of imagery it brings up. In Xanadu did Kubla Kahn a stately pleasure dome decree, where Alph, the sacred river, ran through caverns measureless to man down to a sunless sea. So twice 5 miles of fertile ground with walls and towers were girdled round, and here were gardens bright with sinuous rills, where blossomed many an incense-bearing tree, and here were forests, ancient as the hills, enfolding sunny spots of greenery. But oh, that deep romantic chasm, which slanted down the green hill athwart a cederned cover, a savage place, as holy and enchanted as air beneath a waning moon, was haunted by woman wailing for her demon lover. And from this chasm, with ceaseless turmoil seething, as if this earth, in fast thick pants were breathing, a mighty fountain momently was forced, amid whose swift, half-interred burst, huge fragments vaulted like rebounding hail, or chaffy grain beneath the thresher's flail. And mid these dancing rocks at once and ever, it flung up momently the sacred river, 5 miles meandering with a mazy motion. Through wood and dale the sacred river ran, then reached the caverns measureless to man, and sank in tumult to a lifeless ocean. And mid this tumult Kubla heard from afar ancestral voices prophesizing war. The shadow of the dome of pleasure floated midway on the waves, where was heard the mingled measure from the fountain and the caves. It was a miracle of rare device, a sunny pleasure dome with caves of ice. A damsel with a dulcimer, in a vision once I saw, it was an Abyssinian maid, and on her dulcimer she played, singing of Mount Abora. Could I revive within me her symphony and song, to such a deep delight 'twould win me, that with music loud and long I would build that dome in air, that sunny dome, those caves of ice, and all who heard should see them there, and all should cry, beware, beware. His flashing eyes, his floating hair, weave a circle round him thrice, and close your eyes with holy dread, for he on honeydew hath fed, and drunk the milk of paradise. Now let me walk through it again and see if I can give you some sense of how what I just read might refer to what we're looking at. You should know that Samuel Taylor Coleridge was an opium addict, we are told, and he was financed in his poetry and writing by Thomas and Joshua and Hosea Wedgwood of the famous China fame. I think it says it on the copy. And he worked with people like Charles Lamb and William Wordsworth and Robert Southey, some of which were well known to have been involved in mystical pursuits. So they might have had an awareness of the model that we're talking about. And in an opium reverie, a poem describing the sacred geometry that we're saying is common to experience and cosmology might have been prompted by that cosmology. The poem might have.
And so if you want to see Stan's explanation of that, then watch the video, because he then continues on the continuous creation chart on that same program. That's Alphabet in Our Hands, Part 2, available at meruvideo.com. Who else? I mean, who would find that? I mean,
That was all, yeah, that was one of those that was, look at this. And, the Rumi poem, I think, was more directly related to the kind of things that Stanley was actually looking at. But I don't know if Stanley goes into it in the film, but there is in that old lecture, but there's a story about, why the poem ends as it does. Apparently, somebody knocked on Coleridge's door and woke him up, and that was it. He never finished it. That's the legend around that particular poem. Um, and there's always speculation as to, you know, was he doing opium at the time? That was something that was rather popular in his era, in his place. And I think that's quite possible, not at all outside of the realm of possibility that, it was an opium dream. But that doesn't invalidate Coleridge's vision. I find it interesting, but there are a lot closer hits than that. Nonetheless, you know, it's an indication of how Stanley's mind works, that he was looking for these things, and some with further looking confirmed themselves, and some with further looking wound up soaring. There are better examples. um, so
I
that's
agree. I mean, yeah, I totally agree, but I found it really interesting at the time when he presented that. And I mean, he didn't just read it and let it go. He went into it,
yeah, right.
explanation. So, but yeah, that was a period in English, the literary history, and all those authors and poets back then were all up. I mean, Alice in Wonderland, that whole era was filled with these metaphors and correlations to
And lots of opium.
lots of opium and other things. And not unlike a lot of the creative work that was done in the 60s by musicians under the influence. So we're certainly not making any judgments about that. Anyway, I wanted to throw that in. It kind of fits in. Any other final comments?
Well, look, I mean, Stan was really a brave person. I mean, if he felt that there was something, something even outlandish that seemed like it kind of made sense, and he let it out there, And so to his mind, on the one hand, it was kind of, well, this is kind of fun, but on the other hand, he was really serious. There are a lot, they're highlighted in yellow. I mean, there's a lot of connections. And so it begs the question of where does consciousness begin and where does it end? Mm-hmm. So Stan often talked about Rabbi Akiva and the concept of how he passed from this world to the next, which is, and from an earthly perspective, from any perspective, horrible. He was flailed. His skin was taken off him while alive. But what Stan said about that awful occurrence was, yes, but you have to understand that that has something to do with where do I begin and where do I end. That's the skin, and that's a very, very important concept, and that Rabbi Akiva faced it with unbelievable courage and even not self-abnegation is not the right word. He faced it with transcendence. He achieved transcendence. So Stanley Coleridge is over and doing opium or whatever he's doing. He's this crazy poet, and Stan Tenen is delving into the depths of the Hebrew alphabet and of Genesis, and yet there's a connection, right? So where do I start and where do I end? Where does consciousness start? Where does consciousness end? And I think that's it's a neat example of both how to be brave and also how to make connections. And it goes without saying that if you haven't heard the rock band Rush's version of Xanadu, it's their take on it. You must take a listen. It's a really, really cool song. It's a kind of version of Coleridge's thing, but Anyway, that's my little 2 cents. Please go look at Rush because it's an interesting take, and maybe it'll inspire you. I don't know.
And don't forget, this is all about Stan's concept of geometric metaphor, that intrinsic in everything. And Levana has pointed this out many times, that we live in a world of geometry. And so this was Stan's really emphasizing this point and looking for examples in real life, and knowing that, you know, things are not static, and things, it's all about movement, and it's multidimensional, and it's all around us, and trying to find examples in literature and history and all the different elements of our past, putting it all together. Okay.
Not me.
And that was his mission, and he did it. And we're still looking for examples, and we'll keep doing it on this program. But for today, we've really gone past our time frame. So thank you for watching. We'll continue this on next time. But for today, thanks for watching, and take care. Bye-bye.